All right, we got a small, intimate group here today. This is great. All right, so Sarah Angel Johnson. I've been with Save the Children now for a little over a year. And just to give you a little bit of my background, I've done 2 nonprofits prior to Save the Children, but then 17 years at IBM. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that journey because that plays into here in digital transformation. So let's go ahead and get started here. And will the timer go on to give me an understanding of how much longer I have? All right, perfect, because I can talk for hours, and I don't want to keep you guys here for hours. All right, so the first thing that I want to do is a mindset shift here for a bit. I want you to suspend belief for a little bit because so often in nonprofit, public sector, we are faced with such monumental tech and data challenges that we often start with, it's not possible, don't even want to think about it, too big, too much, can't get there. So I want you to suspend belief with me for the next 30 minutes. I'm gonna do a little exercise here to get you in the right frame of mind. I'm not gonna ask you to do something embarrassing like swing from cables or anything. That's kind of what it looks like I'm gonna make you do here. It's not what I'm gonna make you do. I want you to take your index finger and point it up at the ceiling. I want you to look at it. I want you to draw in a circle on the ceiling in a clockwise manner, a circle. Now I want you to bring that circle down in front of your nose and then look down at it. Which way is it turning? Counterclockwise. Now the first time somebody did this for me was about a decade ago, and I was like this, whoa, no, that can't be possible. No way, how is that possible? It's perception. Are you looking under the clock or are you looking over the clock? And the reason why I start that activity, I still see somebody do it. This was me. Yep, this was me. It's because 2 conflicting truths can exist at the same time and be true. They can both be absolutely true. So I want you to suspend belief for just these next 30 minutes and believe that anything in nonprofit and public sector and tech and data is possible because we're going to solve everything right now during these next 30 minutes. So in this place of temporary suspension of belief, I'd like to tell you about my first nonprofit experience after my 17 years at IBM. So I was at IBM. I was one of the youngest female executives. I had 25,000 people. I was driving across 7 global labs. I was driving $1.7 billion in revenue. So I had my career. I knew where I was going to go. Girl Scouts came knocking and said, Sarah, please, we really need somebody to help us with our cookie program. We've been trying for 10 years to get it digital, and we can't do it. No, I know where I want to be. I want to be the next CEO of IBM. Truly, that's the career path that I was on. They came knocking for a second time. I said no a second time. They came knocking a third time, and I said, okay, finally. I will say yes. That's a whole different conversation on why I said yes. Talk to me afterwards if you're interested. But once I did say yes, I walked into the headquarters in Girl Scouts. I'll never forget this. And I said, oh, I'm here. Where's my team? What team? Okay, that's okay. Where's my budget? What budget? So you want me to take an $860 million program for 1.8 million girls and 800,000 volunteers with no team and no budget and digitize the whole thing, including supply chain and financial management? Yup, that's why we hired you. Oh, and they had already set the press release 6 months from when I started. This was my first introduction to nonprofit. So I thought in IBM, with the 25,000 people I had, that we didn't have money or resources. I was always complaining we don't have enough. I truly understood coming into nonprofit what it meant not to have enough and be scrappy, and we did it. And so I won't bury the lead. I'll tell you what happened, but then I'll tell you how we thought big to do it. So we launched 6 months later. This was in 2014. Some of you may remember the press releases. We had 4 billion media impressions, $41 million more in sales than expected, and 12% higher in adoption, and were featured in Fast Company as one of the 10 most innovative nonprofits. So didn't want to bury the lead. We were good. But to get there was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my entire career. Not the most difficult. That's where I am now. I'll tell you about that. So how do we do that? We started with abundance thinking versus scarcity. Now, I kind of was in this naively because I didn't know any other way of thinking. Coming from IBM, all I thought about were, okay, we've got the money, and we need to go after the results. It's all about profit. So that's just the only way I thought. But then coming to nonprofit, again, naively so, but I am thankful for that, it was all about, okay, you guys are telling me it costs this much, but you're not telling me how much is the return. Scarcity is how much it costs. Abundance is what's the return. You start with the return, not the cost. It is buying time is scarcity versus buying results. Tell me about buying results, and then we'll go backwards into buying time. And then, can't afford to do X. That was the biggest thing. Everybody said, nope, we can't afford to do that. Nope, nope, nope. Okay, well, we can afford to do Y instead. So that abundance mindset was completely one of the ways that we were able to get Digital Cookie off the ground and make it successful. Then it was around goals and strategy. Now, goals, it doesn't start with tech. I'm gonna say that again. It doesn't start with technology. Anytime anybody comes to me and starts talking about technology, I say, nope, 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 stop, 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 stop. I do not want to talk about any tech. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And even more so, tell me how you're gonna measure it. But we'll get to that later. So we started with, well, what are we trying to go after here? It's the girl first. And we coalesced around the shared vision around a girl. Now let me tell you a little bit about the Girl Scout Cookie Program. 113 different CEOs, 113 different boards, 113 different chairs of boards. And operating revenue is 60 to 80% that comes from cookie money. This is high risk for councils. This is why we couldn't get there as a Girl Scout movement to digitizing the iconic Girl Scout Cookie Program. It was too high risk, and there were too many players involved. We were able to come around talking about the girl first, but what that meant was trade-offs, and that's what strategy is, right? Strategy is your plan to achieve your goals, not the opposite. Typically in nonprofit, I see, here's our strategy, and it's a slide with 5 bubbles. No, maybe those are goals. Strategy is your plan to achieve your goals, and you need your goals first, how you're gonna measure them before you can even get to strategy. Strategy is also a willful reduction of options. In nonprofit, in public sector, it is so, what's the word I'm looking for? It is so in our nature to do more, because we don't want to let anybody down for why we're there. But in order to truly do what our mission is there for, a reduction in options is what strategy is. So here, this meant a trade-off. We were gonna focus on the girl, we were gonna focus on her adoption and learning. This was not about the cookie revenue. This was about the girls, 1.8 million girls becoming entrepreneurs. That's what it was about, learning digital marketing, digital supply chain, how to promote their business online. That's what this was about. It meant the trade-offs, that the councils would have to go through manual work. That is the trade-off, because we only had 6 months to do it. And so we focused on that big rock of the girl and the trade-offs, and it was amazing. We had, and at this time, by the way, we did go to Amazon for help, but this was 2014, and it wasn't possible then. It's possible now, but it wasn't possible then for 1.8 million girls to stand up their own individual websites. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about just putting Girl Scout cookies on an e-commerce website and selling them. This is about girls each individually selling their own cookies. So the trade-offs there were, that was the big rock, and the trade-offs were with the volunteers. But then what I had to do was focus on those big rocks, not the sand. So that sand, how many of you know, or how many of you have jars that are just filled with so much sand that you just can't get to those big rocks? You just can't fit them in the jar. You got to empty your jar of sand, which is very, very difficult to do. And that is exactly what we did. We emptied everything else that was trying to be done with the Girl Scout Cookie Program, focused solely on the girl and her experience, and that's how we got this thing off the ground. Now, what that also included, and I don't think I had this in this deck, so I'm just going to mention it really quickly, was a level of transparency and trust that I needed to cultivate with those 800,000 volunteers, because they were about to get a product that sucked for them. It was great for the girls, but it sucked for them. So I went and I traveled around all the different councils, stood up in front of thousands of volunteers and said, here's how the product's not gonna work, and here are all the workarounds. Just stay in it with us for another year, we're gonna fix it, because we're all here for the girls. And that built the trust that we needed to be able to launch this thing for the girls and be successful. So think big, abundance mindset, goals and strategy, big rocks, not sand. So that was my experience at Girl Scouts. But then I moved to an organization that was small. So Girl Scouts is over 100 years old. They have 113 councils. It's big, right? I moved to a smaller nonprofit called Year Up, if any of you are familiar with Year Up. They are about 20 years old. They graduate about 4,000 to 5,000 students a year across 27 sites domestically. So I had to figure out how to adjust my thinking, and I had to figure out how to start small. Because Girl Scouts with that $860 million cookie program is very different than a smaller organization that doesn't have as much capital at hand. So how do you start small? So I had to learn through something called centralized enrollment. So through 27 different locations in Year Up, they were enrolling those 4,000 to 5,000 students a year with homegrown organic systems, processes, and the drop-off rate was tremendous. So imagine the ability to be able to graduate double the amount of students, but we're losing them all right at the beginning of the funnel. So we went on this journey of centralized enrollment. And where we started to start small was human-centered design. I'm a practitioner of human-centered design. I'm a huge believer in this. If you are not familiar, I strongly recommend that you research it, look into it, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about it. Human-centered design, it doesn't start with the tech. It starts with the human. And we built an entire digital experience team at Year Up. We focused on personas of the students and in a prospective student. We focused on the experience map of what that prospective student goes through, current state, to know all the pain points. And we picked the biggest pain point and we prototyped. So we didn't do these big RFPs, and I'm fine to nonprofit, especially now in my third nonprofit experience. We tend to sit in RFP land for months, sometimes years, and then we build something. Oh, guess what? It wasn't right. It's not what was needed. And so we spend all that time in RFP, and where I'm trying to go now with nonprofits is to go into prototype land. Test a hypothesis, true or false. And what this also does is it helps to overcome the fear of failure. I don't know about how it is when your public sector nonprofit organizations, the 3 that I've been in so far, failure was not an option. That was like a no-no. You cannot talk anything about failure. The minute you say that word failure, it's like, nope, not gonna talk to you. So this concept of fast failure just wasn't working just because of the language I was using. So I switched to prototyping, to testing hypotheses, true or false, and then people started to open up, oh, you mean I can test a hypothesis false and it's good? Yeah, it's good if you test it false. It's just as good as if you test it true. We need to be like 50-50 there. And so that's what we did with centralized enrollment, was we headed into prototyping hypotheses and moving away from these RFPs. And what we ended up doing was having bake-offs of prototypes between organizations, vendors, tech and data companies who thought that they could do what we were asking them to do. We said, okay, prove it. Here's our biggest pain point, show us. So no longer these very, very long, intense RFPs, baking off, show us. And it worked. And then moving into product land is a combination of those two, right? Human-centered design, Agile in there too. I've never actually reached pure Agile in nonprofits. That's a different conversation. But heading into product land is the beginning of that versus project. Now you need both. Product is maximizing opportunity. Project is minimizing risk. At least that's how I view it. You need both. And so if you can get both to work together, then you can, in product land, start with your biggest pain point. You can package the value around just that, and you can learn and adapt with just that, and then start to release dot releases in product land. But you also need project management, because that reduces your risk, minimizes risk, to make sure that you're within cost and scope and schedule and all of that stuff. You need both. Going back to abundance thinking, so here at Year Up, what we were able to do is everybody kept telling me, oh, 27 sites, we've tried this before, it's not possible. We don't have the funding, we don't know how to come together to do this. I said, okay, so what are we after? Let's start with the result, and I'll go get the funding. And we did. 2 high net worth donors gave $2 million to fund this because we showed what we could do if we were able to solve this, and then we were able to do it. So starting with the result, starting with the outcome, and then figuring out how you're going to do it is the way that I've been approaching things and starting small. So learning fast. This brings me to my current role. This is the hardest job I've ever had in my entire career, everything combined. I'm working for Save the Children. There are 32 funding countries, US being one of them, and there is no headquarters. We're like the UN. We all look at each other and have to decide. Now, the US is the largest funding member. We fund about 60% of the global movement. And we have programs across 100 countries, and we impact about 100 million children's lives per year. But think of it in terms of digital transformation. And really, I thought I was being hired for a technology transformation. It turns out it's a data transformation. We've got these locked boxes in over 100 countries of data, and I can't open them up. I can't see what's inside them. It could be in people's heads. It could be written down on paper in file cabinets. It could be on somebody's laptop in a spreadsheet. It could be on-prem. It could be in the cloud. It's any combination that you can think of, but I can't access it. And if I can't access it, then how am I supposed to figure out how effective we are? So let me roll back a little bit to a little story here when I started, my first 6 months. I couldn't understand what everybody was saying. My first 2 NGOs were domestic, and they were very based in research. So it was all about the impact. That was the language we spoke. I moved to this international NGO, and I kept looking for, where's the impact? Where are the outcomes? And I felt like I was on Mars, like I was speaking a different language. And I started to get introduced to this whole international NGO landscape of M&E, monitoring and evaluation. We are driven by mostly government funding, which then tracks outputs. So everything we were tracking was outputs, not outcomes, not impact. So I finally figured that out about 6 months into my job. It took me that long to figure it out. Now, how do we move forward? Because everything that I had tried before in terms of digital transformation wasn't working. Starting with the human wasn't working because we're actually not putting tech in the human's hands, right? We're actually putting tech, not in children's hands. We're putting tech in staff hands. For example, with Healthy Start in Life, with prenatal care or with newborn care, it's the tech to understand that skin-to-skin contact for a mother is critically needed for a newborn to be healthy. But that's the tech not in the newborn's hands, not in the mother's hands, right? It's the tech that is different in the way that I had managed tech before in these digital transformations. And so I had to look at what is culturally here that I need to change. And so the first thing I have here for you, and let me just go through all these because the animation's a little weird here. Unspoken rules is the very first thing. So when I go into any digital transformation, I first ask myself, so what are the unspoken rules that can be bent? What are the unspoken rules that can be broken? Because those are the ones that I'm after, the bent and the broken. But more importantly, and most importantly, what are the unspoken rules that are sacrilegious? You can't touch them. Because if you touch them, then you lose all credibility. And so I had to spend 6 months really understanding these unspoken rules because I was floundering in this international NGO land. And then I realized, I get it now. Because we are funded mostly by government contracts like USAID, because it is mostly output-based, I gotta be really careful because we are talking about people's jobs and trying to get us to move from M&E to R&L, research and learning. So how do we make that transition, and what can be bent and broken, and what can't I touch? And then in this data transformation, it's all about the data now. It's not the tech. It's all about the data. The mantra that I have now is, if you didn't measure it, it didn't happen. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And this is what I now go across all of Save the Children saying. because this is exactly how we're going to move from outputs, measuring how many, to outcomes, measuring short-term how effective, to impact, which is long-term, measuring delta change in a society. And it all has to do with data. So really moving from the outputs to the outcomes to the impact is exactly where Save the Children is going. I'm now a little over a year in. Still the hardest job I've ever had in my career. But going back to the last section around starting small, we are hypothesis testing, finally, with AWS, and we are in a land where we have something called Impact Hub that we are standing up for early childhood education, and we have a growth flywheel hypothesis that we are testing. That if we can connect advocacy to policy, to funding, to program, to thought leadership, and then back around, we can actually create a growth flywheel that is sustainable. We're testing it right now in US programs, and it is so exciting. Talk to me in about 3 months and ask me if it worked or if I'm like just abysmally like, oh my gosh, it's not working. Because this is where I'm putting everything that we've learned now in the last 6 months together into this prototype to see if we can launch something, and then we're going to scale it internationally across over 100 countries. So my last slide here, we wouldn't be embarking on this incredible journey without AWS's strategic partnership. So to you, I would say there is a little bit of a call to action here. Where we leverage AWS is the partnership ecosystem. In public sector, nonprofit sector, we want as much funding to go towards why we're there. Leveraging AWS's partnership ecosystem, letting the partners fund what you need to do, that's the power of what AWS is bringing to the table for us now, and one of the reasons why we can launch Impact Hub here. So I have about 8 minutes left. So I hope that this was helpful. I went through it really fast to try to get to leaving time for questions. So happy to answer any questions. And you know what while we have the mic runner and people thinking about questions, this is the first big event I've done since pandemic lockdown. So like to get used to like reading notes not on Zoom on my laptop anymore is so strange. And you know what I forgot to write down? At the top of every one of my note slides, I always write, slow down. So sorry I went too fast.
Hi, Sarah. I have 2 questions.
Yes.
The first one, and I don't think I realized this, can you buy Girl Scout cookies online?
You can buy Girl Scout cookies online from a Girl
Okay.
Scout. If it's on anywhere else, that's illegal.
Okay, I would never do that. Thank you for letting me know. The second is, what's the biggest challenge as part of this particular journey? I mean, you've described Save the Children, a vast network of organizations, a lot of programs, but inherently, is there a resistance to technology? Is it a lack of awareness, or is it something else?
No, actually, everybody wants tech. Everybody wants tech. Everybody wants data, but they always start with the tech and the data. So what I've done is done an analysis of all of the prior implementations in Save the Children, and they've all fallen down. I shouldn't say that. That's not giving enough credit to the people who stood it up. But it's because they started with the tech and not what they were really after. And a lot of it is operational versus impact-driven. And so that's the challenge now, is how do you balance that operational tech and data with moving towards the impact tech and data? Yes, I got 2 back there.
So I work for the State Department of Housing and Community Development in Virginia, and one of our challenges is getting people to agree on the goal. And so I would love some of your thoughts on being able to define those goals so that strategies can be implemented towards that, as opposed to all these activities going on and having no idea if there's impact in it.
Oh, that's such a loaded question, because it really depends on how your organization creates strategy. Right? So if there is a strategic planning period, is there a strategic planning period in your organization? Because if not, that's where I would start.
So apparently we're going through one. So we're going through one, but my problem lies when we're doing cross-system work. So for instance, we have a housing and health initiative going on with many state agencies, but nobody will start by defining what the goal of housing and health is. It's just like this term, and then these are all the things everybody wants to do, staying in their silos and not willing to kind of pull all that up to see what the impact of air, what that collective impact is.
So there's two recommendations I would have for you. The first one is if you go through a 3-year strategic planning cycle, if you can put yourself in year 3, end of year 3, and say, looking backwards, how will I measure that we've been successful? That's where I will often start and can start to break down some of those silos, because once you start thinking about the measurement of success together, if you just say one measurement, what is that? That can help. The second recommendation I have is human-centered design thinking, because then what you can do is start with somebody who your mission is about and create a persona, create an experience map, and create a goal for that one persona, which brings together collective impact, because then everybody shares this collective vision around that one persona. I've also found that to work as well if you can't do the 3 years later and measure how you're going to be successful.
Thank you. Thanks for this presentation. That was really interesting. And so I work also in an NGO, the same sector, and we're also going through this whole thinking process around impact measurement, which is a kind of big shift, I think, in the sector. And my question is I imagine that in SAVE, and I worked for SAVE years ago, you have different departments which are involved. So to reach your objective, what does it mean in terms of further integration of the different departments working toward this objective?
Oh, this is where my pain is every day. So where we've gotten to sort of tie to the prior conversation, we've got 3 measurements and how we're going to know we're going to be successful in 3 years. We literally just kicked off this 3-year strategy in January. We planned it last year. And so the first one is that we want to triple impact for children. You back that up, we need funding. Okay, how much funding? Currently we have $950 million. We need to move to $1.1 billion to get to tripling impact. Okay, how are we going to get the funding? You back that up. Currently we have 1 million supporters. We need 3 million supporters in order to get that funding. Those are our 3 North Stars. 1 million to 3 million supporters, 950 million to 1.1 billion, triple impact. And everybody has to come together in order to do that. And so from a tech and data perspective, that's how we've trying to bring, let me really caveat that, all these divisions together to do that. Let me explain the pain. We have fundraising happening in 5 different divisions in the US alone, who all do it differently. You've got the US programs, the international programs, the mass market, the advocacy, and public policy. I mean, there's 5 different groups. So to bring them together is really tough. But we're doing it, and painfully, and we're really focused on decision-making. It's not about the plan to get there. In nonprofit, we found that decision-making is problematic. I don't have time, I have 2 minutes, but if anybody is interested, I wasn't planning on bringing it up here because it's a little bit too in-depth to bring you through. There's a thing that we're implementing now called RACI-D. You're probably familiar with RACI, right? It's missing D, decision-making in it. We are rolling that out now, and it has moved the needle in 3 months by bringing these groups together and providing a mechanism to make fast decisions in a healthy conflict way. Any other questions in the last minute?
Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it. My question is very simple. You talk about measuring. How often is that measurement necessary? And have you seen that measuring too often is a distraction from other things that may cause you to go off track if you're not paying attention to them?
Yeah, that's a really tough balance there, because right now we're even in the mode of we've got those 3 high-level North Star measurements, but then how do you bring them a click lower, right, to how are you measuring mass market? How are you measuring advocacy and all that funding and supporters? I don't know that I have a perfect answer for you, except for the direction I've given Save the Children Agency is if it's too hard to measure, we shouldn't be spending our time measuring if it takes away from our mission. right? So it's just that really careful balance there, especially when you don't have the tech and data to measure effectively. You might have to come up with math extrapolations, but that's okay, right? As long as you have something to be guiding people towards a common vision. I know that we're up on time. I am happy to stay around a little bit after out in the hallway if anybody else has any questions. All right, thank you so much, everybody.